Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to the Weekend Wellness Hour show. Today we have a new guest who I just recently met, Dr. Richard Jelusich, who is the lead faculty and chair and the board of directors for the California Institute of Health Science. I met him because I am very interested in learning about consciousness, chakras, and I'm going to go by Dr. J.
That's great.
Thank you. He's studied this for decades and he has written books, and I'm very honored to have him here because I know he is a spiritual counselor as well as a professor and does much in the world of energy medicine. So thank you so much for being here, Dr. J.
I'm pleased to be here. Thank you so much.
So can you share with us a little bit about why you got into this work? What drew you into this energy work, consciousness, all of that?
Many years ago, well over 30 years ago, I really started studying spirituality from two viewpoints. One, as you mentioned, the California Institute for Human Science, which is a graduate school and research center into the mind, body, spirit. And on the other side, I went into my own learned experiences as an intuitive, a spiritualist minister, and so forth. And instantly, I became enamored with the chakra system. And ever since then, it's just kind of snowballed into, working with the Institute as faculty and being on the board as well, but also into a school of my own called Integrative Chakra Therapy. And so it has led me to understand that there's a lot more about the chakras than you might commonly know. And I don't want to steer the conversation only about chakras. I realize that. Yeah. But my own path has been, very fascinated with how our perception and awareness are actually related to the condition of our chakra centers, affecting four archetypes: the mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional, not just the body only.
Yeah. That's incredible. So, and I definitely want to dive into kind of your revelations about chakras, and we'll go there as well. But if we start with consciousness, and can you dive into what is kind of some of the common thoughts on the study of consciousness right now? Some people who are listening may never even heard that there's a study of this, or even understand, okay, what does that mean?
Well, generally, I don't know if anyone has an adequate description of what consciousness really is. But in my terminology, most of the consciousness that the average person would be aware of would be related to what we call five sense perception informing your intellect. Your eyes read, your nose smells the scent, your ears hear. But the five sense perceptions are informing you in a form of intelligence related to what I like to call this dimension. But when we start talking about higher orders of consciousness, those are levels of awareness that are reached beyond the five sense perception. So that's where it instantly can go into the realm of rainbows and unicorns.
Yes.
because it's so difficult to prove quantitatively. That is what the Institute seeks to do in a research model. But higher forms of consciousness called superconsciousness are those states of awareness that are beyond the five sense perceptions. So when one starts to engage in these higher orders of consciousness, it can be a little awkward and a little confusing because, higher states of awareness are not conceptual thinking or imagination. They're much more than that. It's a state of being that one reaches through spiritual practices, meditation, yoga practices, and so forth.
Well, that's good. And thanks for giving the examples of how people can get to those states, because when you have a conversation and you're thinking, okay, how do I get to a higher level of consciousness? It's great if we can have an example. Okay, I can go on a spiritual journey and see what that entails. Now, do people typically need a guide to help them access these other levels of consciousness?
It is good to have a teacher who can help you to move in a very safe manner. One of my main teachers, who was the founder and first president of CIHS, Dr. Hiroshi Motoyama, he talked about the safety way in that, as you climb a ladder, you go one rung at a time, not five or six at a time. So
Yeah.
it's always good to be with someone or some teaching that has a kind of an iteration to it, because as we open up intuitively, we
Mhm.
also integrate and process, and that takes time. It doesn't go quickly. Like people who take my own course in integrative chakra therapy, in order to become a practitioner, it takes over 2.5 years, because it takes time for the person to integrate those levels of awareness into their daily waking consciousness. So slower is better, although we
Mhm.
live in an age where, we want it all,
Mhm.
no hurry, right now would be fine.
Mhm. Yep. Yep. Do it
And,
yesterday.
and that's why, you see a lot of people turning to plant medicine and so forth.
Mhm.
But again, it's better to be safe and work with qualified teachers who've actually been there and have achieved these states, so that they can help a person to go along in a way that is safe for them. Just think of a fruit tree in an orchard. You want the
Yeah.
fruit to come when it's ready, and
Mhm.
everybody's like a different type of fruit. We don't all ripen the same. So
Mhm.
that's why it takes a lot of responsibility and guidance from a qualified teacher to bring that person along in a safe manner.
Mhm. And is this something that would be considered a daily practice where you're working on changing your awareness and achieving that higher level of consciousness? Is this a daily practice to bring about those changes? And then once you've achieved that level of consciousness, is it something that you strive to achieve every day as well?
It's something that could be a daily practice.
Mhm.
The premise is that we live in a oneness, that there
Mhm.
really is no separation. We're proving it scientifically all the time, especially for distance healing. I have distance healing clients all over the place.
Mhm.
And the thing is that, if you live in a oneness, then every moment is whole and complete. So the reminder is that if every breath is your most important breath, then every moment can be that act of power where you make a decision in that moment to be in that place of power, to acquiesce to a level of consciousness that you already possess, but to allow it to come forward in that moment. So yes, daily practices are helpful, but also a kind of a mindfulness that grounds you into the present moment, that says, oh, wait a minute, this is my most important moment right now. This is where I have power, is in this moment. The
Mhm.
decisions I make now are the most relevant and most important ones, because I think that's what helps a person a lot, to be really focused and centered in their level of awareness, and not worry about, well, how much more intuitive am I going to be? How much more awakened do I need to be? And how
Mhm.
conscious am I? Because those are statements that are related to time.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with making the effort, but if you put your effort off into some future date, how are you reaping the benefit of the moment?
Yeah.
So yes, it's good to have a practice, but it's also really good to be fully cognizant that all of your power is in the moment.
Right now. Okay. And so when someone's looking at, okay, I want to achieve this super consciousness or work towards it,
Mhm.
what are the goals that people are looking for when they're going towards it? Is it an inner peace? What is it?
It can be a destructive process, in that,
Mhm.
the more you awaken, the more stuff you bring up that you have to process to get past what we call
Mhm.
the seeds of karma will sprout.
Mhm.
But I think one of the keys to insert right here is that it's very difficult to attain any higher states of consciousness with just the intellect.
Mhm.
It's like reading about an orange without actually tasting one, right?
Yeah.
So the thing is that the word faith is crucial, in that your reach has to extend beyond your intellectual grasp. So I think this is where a lot of people can have some problems, because they say, well, what do you mean by faith? It means trusting your intuitive faculties, because to me,
Yeah.
the chakras are on 24/7. They're never off. They're centers of consciousness. Therefore, your intuitive faculties are on 24/7. They're never off. They may not be cultivated, but as you engage in levels of faith, trusting what some people call your inner knower, the
Mhm.
more you do that, the more you become awakened to higher orders, or towards levels of super consciousness that then merge those higher levels of consciousness with your physical waking cognitive mind, and you go through qualitative states of change. Very difficult to describe, but definitely an experiential aspect of higher orders of consciousness.
So when you're working towards that and you're working on your intuition and listening to your intuition, I assume that means you would really need to be in a very present conscious state.
Focused. Yeah,
Focused.
focused.
Okay.
And
Okay.
this is where sometimes, again, we have a little bit of difficulty because we like to know what's going to happen next. We like to project what's going to happen next.
Mhm.
But the intuition doesn't always work that way. And it's not a feeling so much as an emotion. It is, think of faith as a muscle that moves the intuition and acts as a bridge between the physical and the non-physical. So if a person's faith is really strong, when it gets so strong, the bridge actually becomes part of the physical and non-physical together, what we call merging these two aspects as one. And this is how a person becomes, shall we say, more evolved, more awakened spiritually. Doesn't matter what religion or what spiritual avocation is. To me, it all goes to the same place.
And for people who this is completely new and they say, I've tried to listen to my intuition and it led me down a path that wasn't so great. And so then they're afraid to listen to their intuition and they turn towards, okay, I'm not going to listen to myself. I'm going to just rely on someone else now and get more feedback.
Yeah.
What do you
And
say to people like that?
It can be very circuitous. Think of sailing. You want to go here, but you're sailing like this because you have to tack up into the wind. So a lot of times your faith will take you over here and your physical rational mind says, I want to go here. But what happens is you take these circuitous turns because those experiences are necessary to get to more than what you can imagine.
Okay.
But what you can imagine with your cognitive thinking mind is not the same thing as higher orders of awareness. And that's hard for us. It's really hard because we like guarantees. We like to project what's going to happen, but it doesn't work that way spiritually. So that's why I'll tell my students, it's better to want what you need than to need what you want.
Yes. Well, and the other thing is safety. We want the feelings of security and safety. And when you put faith into something, you're kind of giving up that sense of the concrete safety into, I'm going to be safe in something I believe in, but don't really know.
And faith doesn't sound academic.
No.
It doesn't sound scholarly. Well, I had faith. Well, but you work with any of the great teachers and they'll tell you, yoga without faith, just stretching. Prayer and meditation without faith, just thinking. So this is where the risk comes in. I'm well known for 30 years of doing what I call flower readings, which is where people will bring a flower, say 10 people, they put the flower on the table. And then I have no idea who brought which flower, no clue, because then I come into the room. So the idea is I pick up a flower, close my eyes and start doing a reading and some healing work on it. It sounds like a witch doctor, right? But the point is the anonymity and still being able to read precisely for that person what's going on in their life is a way of showing faith. It's not to show that I'm good at it. It's to show that we all possess these abilities.
Interesting.
But that's one way to teach that faith is real, that it actually works. But it's not something you can get from a book. It's something you have to trust within your heart, which you know to be true before your mind's got it figured out. That's to me, that's where the real growth is.
Yeah. And being around other people who are going on this journey helps us kind of understand or at least relate to people who are wanting to go onto this journey and develop a faith to get to this higher level of consciousness.
And you will meet those kind of people in your life's path because they are there to help assist you in your own growth. It's what I call a co-creative conscious collaboration. It's just a fancy way of saying that you and I have a physical body, but we are actually spirits who have a physical body, not the other way around. And so this spiritual aspect of ourselves is consciously co-creating other things, situations and circumstances that we then step into that represent a growth for us. So that's why it's been said that if a person is really conscious, they're also alert saying, this moment, this is propitious. This is really something I should pay attention to. This is important. And that's where the faith comes in, is to trust that that process works. Think synchronicity, that the process works 24/7.
Okay. That's interesting. And it would be great to pull in the chakras, because you did
Mm.
go right over about chakras being a level of consciousness. So why don't we bring those in a little bit? And if you could share why chakras are more than just energy centers in us.
Well, the common idea about a chakra center, is we have
Mhm.
7 chakras lined up more or less with the column of the spine, is that they're energy centers, like fuel, electricity would be energy. And it is true that they do convert what's called a psi energy into the chi or the ki that goes through the interstitial tissues in your glands and your organs. This is what acupuncturists access. But more than that, they are conduits of consciousness between what is called astral and causal dimensions of self. In other words, you go back to the Vedas and they talk about these 3 yoga bodies, that you actually have a physical body, an astral body and mind, and a causal body and mind. And I know to some people that may sound way out there, but what it means is that the consciousness that flows through the chakras affect all 4 archetypes of the human being, not just your body, the mental, emotional, and spiritual processes. So if a person is to awaken the chakra, we talk about that all the time, awakening the chakra. Well, what you're actually doing is you're merging the astral and the causal self with the physical. So you're not bringing your soul into your body, and you're not ascending out of body. You're actually bringing the 2 together as one. So there's basically no difference. So this is why it's important for us to do some kind of a spiritual exercise, some rigor or some discipline that does help to awaken the chakras. And then what happens to the person is they go through a qualitative shift. And again, like I said before, it's not easy to describe what that shift is, but you're definitely a different person, because your awareness is now seeing things, quote unquote, at a higher level than just the intellectual mind alone can process.
Yeah. And that's interesting. So is that part of this integrative chakra therapy, where you're working with people so they can awaken a chakra? And if so, how do you determine which chakra to awaken? Is it based on one is dominant in a person?
It's a good point. Thanks you for the segue. I have a theory that one chakra may be more dominant than the others, and each chakra is possessed of one or more intuitive faculties. So let's say you're right-handed. Well, it's nothing wrong with your left hand. You just use your right hand. So you could have a dominant throat chakra, and that just means you have a proclivity or a tendency to use this one more than you would the other chakras. So it has its own unique properties. One of them, which is called telepathy, which is to know which is the character of a person, place, or thing. So point being, when my students become practitioners, they're taught to use their chakras to assess the chakras of the person they're working on. So the way ICT is taught is that the practitioner actually is advancing themselves, because they have to use the muscle of their chakras to be able to assess someone else, and then to determine what is the character of that chakra, what is the higher and lower aspects, and how does it affect those 4 archetypes. So they then become conduits only of healing energy. They don't send any of their own power. They're just, I like to use the word God, but you can say divine or source or whatever, but they become conduits of that energy that flows through them. And basically, the person is just healing themselves. They already have a perfect blueprint. So the healer acts as a conduit, but then the second half of ICT is that the practitioner then gives an assessment, not a psychic reading, but says, okay, here's what flowed through me. Here's what's going on. Here's what you can do about it. Here's how to go about doing it, because I'm very big into self-empowerment. So then we work on the person, whether remote or in person, but then we tell them, okay, here's what you can do about this. And so we've been very busy doing this. We have free Monday night healing work. And we just started in person, in fact, this last Monday, because of the 2 years of the pandemic.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And so it's an in-person on the Monday nights where people come
or remotely.
remote. Okay.
Yeah, they can come in on Zoom, and they go to a breakout room with one or more practitioner, and we that's our service to the public.
That's interesting. And that's a great way to get people introduced to this type of therapy as well. Give people more knowledge so that they can experience it. And sometimes we need experience to help us get to that next level of understanding and to to develop that faith, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So when someone's going through this process, you often hear the words, you need to balance your chakras.
Oh, yeah.
Now, can you explain that? Does that resonate with you?
Well, the chakra, in most of the world, the chakras of people are dormant, and that's not a bad word. It means they're
Yeah.
just not awakened. So, chakras can be strong, weak, excess, deficient, erratic, depending on what the practitioner is observing in the chakra. But when we talk about balancing the chakras, we're actually talking about how each chakra is strong within itself. So we have various exercises that we will give to the people who come for healing. One of them is called a circulation of light. Another one is a chakra breathing exercise, but these are exercises of intention. So you're doing a kind of a 4-part breathing, you're focusing on the chakra, and you're focusing on, if you like, balancing the energies in that chakra. So it's very effective, and these are tools that people can use to achieve an overall state of balance. And to your earlier point, yeah, more contentment, more calmness, more inner peace.
Okay. And so if someone has awakened all of their chakras, would you just feel a sense of you want to be around that person, that they have this good energy? How would that person inside feel to know that all of their chakras are awakened and they can sense? I'm
Yeah, that's
curious.
good. It's a good point, because my teacher talked about in order to be enlightened, you do have to awaken the chakras, but you still have to have a good moral and ethical character regardless.
Yeah.
But then people will be attracted to you through this, what I call 95% that's not verbal or physical, that's energy that goes out everywhere. This is that qualitative state of our being.
Yeah.
And they take what I call a psychic relationship to what you represent. So if you come up to a man or a woman whose chakras are all awakened, let's say in the causal dimension, one of the highest orders of awakening that there is, and still be a unique person, you can definitely benefit from their presence in your life, but it doesn't have to be physically. You could read a book by them. You could read a blog post. You could listen to watch a video, because everything is energy, right? So it doesn't have to be, you physically have to be with that person, because, like I said, with distance healing, distance is no factor in energy medicine. So that is a matter of the conscious intent working on that person's chakras, and they take a psychic relationship to the healer. Let's say the healer's chakras are awakened. Then that helps that person to come to higher orders of realization, but not just Shazam, but maybe physical health or mental problems or emotional problems, or maybe a spiritual awakening.
That's interesting. And when you're working with someone through distance healing and there's that connection, are you still speaking to them actually on a phone or through Zoom or some type of manner? Or is it even there's no communication verbally, but you can still be working on someone even if there isn't that direct speaking connection?
Yes. And one of the ways we do that is through healing requests. Let's say someone has an infirmity and they ask us for a healing request. Well, then we definitely can work on that person with very little information. There's no problem to tune into that person with their permission, of course, to work on them.
Yeah. And do they have to be aware that this is happening at that time?
No.
Interesting. Okay.
No, not necessary.
Okay. That's wonderful. This is incredible. And so with the chakras, would you say they need to be opened and awakened in order to achieve some of the super consciousness that we're working towards?
But we tend to think in levels, like how awakened are my chakras? 50% more awakened than yesterday. So we have to kind of let go of that, but just keep making the effort, keep aspiring towards higher levels, keep yielding what's called a feminine principle, which is using your power to yield to the power that you already have rather than push only, but you allow it to come forth. And so that process of allowing takes a lot of surrender, not like surrender, give up, but surrender to this inner knower, this inner power, the God within, some people call it. But in that way, then you represent that level of awakeness, whatever that is. And then because you represent that level, people will be drawn to you automatically who are seeking that level. They may not consciously know it, but they may associate with you because you now represent a level of awareness that they're looking for.
Okay, that makes sense. And as you're going through this, I can imagine, and we touched on this before, where it may open up stuff from people's pasts. So part of, I work with people who have gone through some traumas or trying to get out of chronic pain. And part of letting go is it opens them up to, oh shoot, I have to face this now. What do I do? Now I have to face something before I can move on, or they've used fear to create this protective shield around them, and it's hard for them to let go of that. So how do people go through that, and how do you suggest they get help going through that?
Well, in my work, we have a community of healers, but let's say you're an individual and you don't have a community. So one thing is you work with the healer, and then they do give you some exercises or some methods of support where you don't feel like you're going through this by yourself. And like you said on your website, sometimes it's breathing exercises and sometimes it's ways of addressing what's going on in your life. So I'm a big how-to person, which is, helping the person, give them tools so that through the repetition of these tools, they can become much more stable and much more self-empowered.
It makes sense. People like something where they can almost fall back onto and say, okay, I can try this, or I can try this. It gives them, somehow grounds them as they're moving through something. It's interesting. So something I know you also study is biofields. Can you share a little bit on that and how that's different from chakras, and how does that come into play?
The term biofield came about around 1994 when science decided we need to have a name that sounds more cool than the aura.
Okay.
But I still like aura.
I do too.
But the human biofield is a combination of 7 chakras, what is called Sushumna, which is the main column of light that goes up and down your spine through the lenses of all 7 chakras, and the Ida and the Pingala, which are the twin serpents of the caduceus, right? The medical caduceus. All of those 3 together are the biofield. And here's the trick. The biofield holds your body in space-time, not the other way around. So you don't radiate an aura. Your aura radiates you. Your aura is the spiritual essence of yourself, holding 80 to 1 trillion cells, or 100 trillion cells, in time and space until such time as you're done. And then your body goes back to its constituent materials, but the spiritual essence remains in the astral or causal dimension. So I know for some people hearing this the first time, it's like, this is way out there, but this is my interpretation of what I think the biofield really is. It's an emanation from the next dimension, which we call astral dimension, or some people call the level of the soul, that radiates into this dimension, your physical nature in time space. I mean, I know what that must sound like to some people. I get it, but I still have to explain in the way that I understand.
Yeah, and I'm curious, so then the soul is there, and does it go into a human body then when you're born and create this biofield
at conception?
Okay.
At conception.
That's fascinating.
To me, at conception, the sperm and the ovum meet, but the third essence is the actual fetal spirit, the spirit of the baby itself, that fuses with the sperm and the ovum to create cell division to become the nature of the uniqueness of that person in this lifetime.
That's fascinating. That's amazing. And I can understand how this all fits together. So if people are kind of blown away by this or want to learn more, I know you teach courses. And so what are some of the options out there that people can get involved in? So is it in person, online? What are some of the options?
Well, I do teach integrative chakra therapy for students. I am also a counselor and energy medicine healer. And I have clients all over the world who seek me out for private sessions. And my website is lightnews.org, lightnews.org. And then on the academic side at California Institute for Human Science, which is cihs.edu, I'm a professor there, and I'm just finished teaching a course 2 nights ago, and then I'll be teaching in the fall quarter as well. So, and it's one of the only universities, accredited universities on the planet, whose tagline is mind, body, spirit. That is definitely a niche market.
It really is. And when I started looking into the Institute, I was actually quite shocked by having the spirit involved in discussing consciousness. I hadn't seen that before. And it's really neat. I know you have a lot of different programs, and the courses all look fascinating.
This month is 30 years that we've been in existence. And I was the first of 3 students that started in September of 1992.
Oh, congratulations. That's amazing. And so, and you teach, and some of the courses I see on there, so psychology of the chakras.
Right.
And so is that going into kind of more of the aspects of each of the chakras and diving into each of them?
Yeah, I wrote a book on it called Eye of the Lotus, Psychology of the Chakras. And it's basically a book that describes how the chakras work, affecting the way we perceive reality. So going back to the throat chakra, if that one was stronger, even though they're all working and they're all the intuitive faculties are on all the time, you might be more prominent or dominant here. So you might be more telepathic than not. And again, I know what that must sound like, but this teaching about chakras and dominant chakras is about how we perceive reality and why we react the way we do. Because we take a psychic relationship to people, places, things, animals, plants, long before the mind ever thinks a single thought. But most people don't think that way. But to me, this is precisely how it happens.
That's fascinating. That's wonderful. And so the course that's coming up next for you in the fall, which one is that you're teaching?
Well, I'm starting a new group of my own, integrative chakra therapy, in October. And there's an introduction to integrative chakra therapy, a free lecture, I think, happening next on the 20th. At CIHS, I'll be teaching psychology of the chakras. And I'll also be teaching toward a superconsciousness. So I'm teaching 2 courses. Also, we have a public program at CIHS that is a certification course, an 8-week certification course in psychology of the chakras. So if you're a member of the public and you don't want to take the academic course, but you want to learn, because it's going to have a lot of experiential exercises in it. It isn't just going to be me as a talking head. It's going to be you working and doing exercises that help you to understand how the chakras work, why they perceive the way they do, and how it affects the way your perception of reality affects your actions in life.
That's great. So there's 2 options. So people can, if they're going through the California Institute of Human Science, so they can either, as just a member of the public, take that course, but you can also enroll as a student going towards a degree and then take courses with you that way.
Right.
Or
and then I have my integrative chakra therapy. Plus, I do a lot of other workshops too, like past lives and flower readings and stuff like that I do on my own. So between the 2, it keeps me pretty busy. Plus, we just started this wellness center in Encinitas, September 1st, called Bamboo Garden Wellness Center, which is a home for practitioners of all kinds of integrative healing arts, acupuncture, naturopath, reflexology, therapy, energy psychology, and so forth.
Okay, that's wonderful. This is great. And so for those who are interested in the integrative chakra therapy, that's an actual certification program you mentioned was 2.5 years?
Well, they can take it in modules. The first module is just the first 3 levels. So you don't have to take the whole thing, but you can take it in levels according to what you'd like to accomplish for yourself. So that way we make it very easy for someone who doesn't even want to be a practitioner. Maybe they're just taking it for their own spiritual enhancement.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Or maybe they just want to take the first 3 levels. So we make it very approachable for people.
Okay. This is fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing everything that you're doing and all of this information. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me on your program.
Thank you. And one more time, it's lightnews.org. O-R-G.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you all for being here today. It was a pleasure. Have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll see you next week. Take care. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.